Well, welcome to the group coaching session dedicated to 6 directional movements. We already started exploring 6 directional movements last week, and we played a little bit with sticks. And I wanted to check if you remember any of it and what kind of questions or challenges perhaps you encountered, if any.
Well, I think I've had a difficult time to figure out exactly how to do it. So I only practiced the 2 first ones and tried with the closing, but then I couldn't remember the last one.
I see. Okay. Well, that shouldn't be a problem. So, as I promised, we would work on all the 6 directional movements because we want to be able to project energy in any direction in 3-dimensional space. And these are obviously really basic, well, intermediate movements. So we're learning how to send waves either forward or backward, up, down, in and out. And these are cardinal directions, and they each have a certain principle or a certain idea why they are they're supposed to be done. For example, uppercut. Well, we're projecting upwards. We may be lifting things up. We may be tossing something. For example, downward press, as the name implies, is projecting energy downwards to apply pressure on something. For example, push, forward push. Again, I took painstaking efforts to translate everything into English in a way that would be easy to understand. And forward push, obviously, is to project energy forward. Now, guess what? Backward pull is exactly for the purpose of pulling, hence the name. So what we're going to do is we're going to experiment with all of these movements. Last week, we played with a stick. Let's see if we can play without a stick for today, just so that we get a little bit of an idea how to do it without any implements. Okay? Is that all right with you?
Yes.
Great.
Good try.
Just a second. All right. So, to project energy forward, we just send a wave starting with a step of the opposite foot in the forward direction. Kind of like this. Very nice. Yes, let's do it again. Great. So not only do we project energy forward with one hand, the other hand is doing something. If it holds the stick, obviously, that's what it's doing. But if it's not holding the stick, it's still performing the secondary movement of a backward pull. Now, does it always have to do it? It doesn't always have to do it, but it better do something rather than just dangle down or, you stick it in the pocket. What else can it do? Well, maybe you can do an uppercut. Well, that doesn't work so well though. Maybe you can do an opening. Well, it really disperses your energy in different directions. Maybe you can do a downward press. Well, that makes it really difficult to project energy forward. It kind of draws you down. Maybe you can do a closing. That really messes everything up. What else can you do? Maybe you can do another forward push. Well, you can do another forward push with the other hand, but it's not going to empower the movement of the primary hand. Or maybe you can do backward pull. And when you compare it to other things, you will feel that one of these options actually gives you the best result. In most cases, the backward pull with the secondary hand is going to give you the empowerment of the primary hand. So that's kind of like an alchemy. It's magic. You do something in reverse, seems like it's supposed to actually make things worse, but actually it empowers the primary movement. So the yin and yang energies work together. They actually create greater harmony. So instead of making things worse, it actually empowers the action that we're trying to perform. And that alchemical principle is something that we don't just theoretically talk about, we actually embody. So, any questions about forward push? Okay, so the principles that are included in a forward push or that used in a forward push. Who can tell me which principles those are? I'm talking about alignments, principles of alignments. Any principles that you can recall that are integrated into forward push?
Rooting and grounding, streamlining, centering.
Very good. Rooting, grounding, streamlining. That's really good. Any others?
Centering.
More than centering, what is pertinent in forward push is orientation.
Oh, that's what.
The hand and center line are in alignment with each other. And there is one more, the principle of stabilization.
Yeah.
So the foot that you step forward with, ideally would be on your center line so that you become immediately stable once you completed the forward push. What's interesting is that you need to complete the forward push first before that foot even lands, which is kind of interesting, right? You're using power instead of force. So you deliver energy into a target and then land on the ground with a stepping foot. If you deliver energy and step, you're using power, you're using your whole body moving in the direction animated by gravity. If you step and then do forward push, this is going to be a lot weaker, and instead of power, you'll be using force. So this is one of the major components of harmonious culture movement. Using power instead of force. Makes sense, right? Cool. Forward push can be done with alternating arms. So I can do movement forward with the right hand making forward push, and then another movement with the left hand making forward push. Yeah. Just like that. So you can imagine that you're still holding that stick. It's an imaginary magic wand. So imagine that you are moving with a stick, switching hands. One hand is performing backward pull, the other one is performing forward push. And there is something that we use between steps, and I cannot tell because I can't see your feet, but I can show you what my feet are doing. They are tapping, tap and step, tap and step, tap and step, tap and step. And so this tap is where that wave comes from. That wave that eventually flows into your arm and projects the energy forward. Kind of like that. Let's try it again. Very nice. Yeah, interestingly enough, the movement is not going to be perfectly straight, following just one straight line. It's going to follow the zigzag line, as I mentioned in our last week's session, because shoulders have certain widths to them. So the movement comes from here, from the shoulder towards the center line, which means at an angle. And that means the center of mass ideally would also move at an angle in order to make this movement of an arm a proper movement. One of the interesting things that most people never pay attention to or don't pay enough attention to is where they're looking. Because when you perform these movements like in Tai Chi form, 99% of players who do Tai Chi forms are not looking at their hands. They're looking somewhere out the window, or maybe sometimes at their feet, or maybe sometimes at something else, except where the energy is actually needed. It's needed right here. So where attention goes, energy flows. If I pay attention to my hand has energy. If I don't pay attention to my hand doesn't have as much energy. If I'm looking at my feet or if I'm looking at the window, it's all going to be much weaker as compared to paying attention to where my energy is actually needed. Okay. So one of the reasons why we focus our glance on our hand, or I would say an additional reason why we focus on our hand with our eyes, is also to help the neck align. Neck consists of 7 vertebrae. It's called cervical spine, right? And the cervical spine is part of the whole spine. So if the cervical spine is not in alignment, the whole spine is not in alignment. That means we actually streamline the cervical spine in addition to the rest of the spine, thoracic and lumbar spine. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, and you can see, like for example, as you drop the eyes down, your head actually tips down a little bit. As your head tips down, there is less alignment. If your head is too high, there's also less alignment. So we want to basically find a sweet spot or optimal alignment of the neck. The same thing also works in the context of backward pull. In the backward pull, there is also the concern about alignment of the neck, but there is a different question, the question about turning the head. Because most people, when they turn their heads kind of like this. So you see how my head is not quite in alignment. My one eye is higher than the other eye. Mm. So if I align my head, I can turn my head by just touching the top of my head with the fingers. Just one finger touching the top of my head. So then I can turn my head without tilting. Or a good exercise is to actually look in the mirror or at the computer screen and do a centering exercise, but maintaining alignment of the head, looking pretty much in the same direction. Mm-hmm. So this is going to feel a little bit strange because you're practicing how to not move your head. But the head is moving in relation to the body, since the body is turning. What you're doing is essentially you are remembering how to keep the head in alignment when the body is turning, and everything is relative. So you can also turn the head in relation to the body and keep it in alignment. Why do we want that? Because if the cervical spine is out of alignment, it means the entire spine is not in alignment. So when we're doing backward pull, we want to be able to look at, in a direction of the elbow if we're projecting energy with an elbow. Or even if we're pulling, we don't want to be looking down. We want to look in the direction of energy projection. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to be looking at, for example, if we're doing tug of war game, we don't want to be looking at our opponents, which is what everybody does. When they play a tug of war, they're looking at their opponents, which means they're looking in the direction opposite of where they actually intend to project energy. No wonder when I play this intellectual game of tug of war with people, I always win. It's like it's some kind of unfair advantage that I enjoy because I don't look at the person I'm playing the game against. I'm looking in the direction where I'm projecting the energy. And those people who don't know about this simple principle, they're going to lose. Of course, I also use power instead of force. So I make sure that when I perform backward pull, I step back with the same side foot as the primary arm performing backward pull. But I land on the ground after I actually project energy in this direction. As you can see, when I land on the ground, my foot and my knee of the weight-bearing foot are more or less in alignment with my center line. Or vice versa, I align my center line with the toes and the knee of that leg. So basically, that's the principle of grounding. Sorry, principle of stabilization. And the principle of grounding is that I land on the entire sole of the foot, flat as a pancake.
Mm.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm bending the knee, I can land on that foot without resorting to absorbing the shock of landing with the muscles of the lower leg. Why? Because I'm using the muscles of the upper leg, the quads, to absorb the shock of landing. As I mentioned, we usually don't run chasing after anyone with backward pulls, doing one with one hand and then another one with the other hand, but it's possible to do it anyway, just for the purpose of practice. So you can do a backward pull with the right hand, with the left hand, alternating. In this case, you'll be pivoting on the heel of the foot that's bending the ground as you're stepping. Yeah, very good. So in a sense, you're turning 180 degrees, facing, for example, if you started facing north, then you're going to face either west or east with your center line. Now, instead of chasing after anyone with backward pulls, what I would rather do is combine forward push and backward pull so that I can perform them with the same arm doing primary movements. For example, right now, my right arm doing forward push as a primary movement, and that's switching when I tap, and I'm making backward pull as a primary movement. Beautiful. And the same thing can be done with the left arm doing primary movements.
Should think so.
And remember, one of the reasons I mentioned we used sticks is to create smooth transitions from forward push to backward pull and vice versa. So there is no point in time when I freeze. Freezing like this at the end of the movement means there's tension. I don't want to create more tension. I want to relax as soon as I deliver energy into the target. I relax. So my hand drops. Yes, beautiful. Or instead of dropping of the hand, another even more advanced way of looking at it is that you grab something. Forward push may be a movement to actually grab something. And then you pull. So forward push is the beginning of a backward pull. Yeah, very nice. And when you're grabbing something and start pulling, your hand is going to start turning in this direction, which is what we call supination. And as you're supinating, your hand stays on the center line. Obviously, you're going to turn at about 90 degrees angle. from facing north, for example, to facing west. But the hand is going to be still on the center line. So it's going to have power. The other hand doesn't have to stay on the center line because it's doing secondary movement. So it can go a little bit at an angle or even directly in the opposite direction. That's what they do in Tai Chi. They do this, as I mentioned last week, they move the move called repulse the monkey. And repulse the monkey is not really about repulsion. It's actually backward pull. The secondary hand is doing forward push, which looks repulsive, but it's not really about pushing away anything. It's about pulling. You can perform the forward push in whatever direction you choose to. It's the secondary movement, so it's not going to matter that much in most cases. However, we want to make sure that we understand what primary movement is so that we actually can make that movement as effective as possible. So forward push is a secondary movement. In this case, the backward pull is the primary. And I want to turn my head in the direction where I'm projecting energy. So again, looking at the monkey is not necessary here. I don't want to look at the monkey when doing backward pull. No, thank you very much. I want to actually project energy in the direction backwards. Okay. Any questions about backward pull, folks? No? Cool. All right, these are pretty easy movements. Also pretty obvious as to how to apply them in daily life, right? Now, let's take a look at opening and closing. Those are also relatively simple movements, especially opening is a pretty simple movement. Again, if we make reference to Tai Chi, there is the Tai Chi move called cloud hands. Cloud hands is often performed this way, or going the other way. You cannot see my legs. It's actually quite horrendous because what most Tai Chi practitioners do with their legs is something that I always say to not do. They cross their legs. They walk with a cross step when they do cloud hands. It's a big mistake to move that way because every time you cross your legs, you're going to put yourself in a very unbalanced position. And you won't have any power. As a result of crossing legs like this, you actually rob yourself of power because you're going to be using force instead of power. So what do we do? Instead, we just lift the foot on the same side of the body as the opening arm. And we step in that direction. That's it. Simple, but it's so much more effective. It's virtually the same movement as we studied in the basic Qidao program, with only one difference. The wave goes further, past the elbow. In the basic program, where we're learning how to do this movement with the elbows, well, let's send the wave further past the elbows into the hand. Obviously, if you never learn how to send a wave to the elbows, sending a wave to the hand would be challenging because it can't make it even to the elbow. If it can't make it to the elbow, what's the likelihood of making it to the hand?
I have a question with the hands, actually. When you do this, the
Yes.
hands, they stay at pointing forward or upwards?
So the hand first is below the elbow. So the wave goes from the center of the body to the periphery. So the wave goes from the hip to the shoulder as you're making the step. So the shoulder rises. Then elbow starts rising higher than the shoulder and higher than the hand. Then the hand starts rising higher than the elbow. As the elbow starts dropping, the hand will start turning.
Mm.
You don't want to turn it all the way upright into the vertical position. No. It's turning maybe to 30, 45 degrees angle. And the idea, of course, is to apply energy projection or perform energy projection using Lagoon point. Just like we were doing it with a stick, now we can do it without a stick.
And where does it go from there then?
From there, it relaxes. So the elbow drops even further down, and the hand relaxes and comes towards the body, and eventually can perform a light bulb screwing maneuver at 6 o'clock position near the navel.
So after you hit the target, the fingers actually go up, and then
Yes. So that's when the fingers go up because the elbow is dropping even further down. So it's a very graceful movement where there is a visible wave. Obviously, right now we're working on the rather mechanical visible waves. With practice, we will learn how to make these waves higher frequency, much more refined, so that they will not even be visible. Energy projections don't have to be visible energies. But right now we're doing it in a really baby step manner. So it's a visible wave. And again, the head turns in a way similar to the way that it turns in the backward pull. It turns, it stays in alignment. The opposite hand, secondary hand, is performing a miniature closing. Basically, that's what that light bulb screwing maneuver is down at the 6 o'clock position. The secret sauce of Qidao is the tap. So obviously we're practicing it as we're switching from stepping in one direction to stepping in the opposite direction. And also, that's a good time to inhale. If you move slowly enough, you will not hyperventilate. So you'll be inhaling on the tap, exhaling on the step. Or even more importantly, exhaling during the energy projection, because that's when exhalation would matter the most. If you don't exhale an energy projection at the moment in time when you're projecting energy, what else are you doing with your breath? It may be inhaling. Oh, that's gonna work really funny. It may be holding your breath. That's going to work really funny too. What we do is we exhale, which is what natural expression of the body is when you exert effort. Some people grunt. It's kind of like a stifle exhalation. Grunting is like, ugh. This is grunting. We don't want to grunt. In other words, we don't want to obstruct the flow of air with our vocal cords. We just exhale, and if you want to produce any sound, you might as well practice mantra ha. It's a very relaxed movement. It's like a sigh of relaxation. Now, why do we relax when we project energy? Most people think that they need to tense up to project energy. That's why they grunt.
Then the energy can't flow. If it tense up, then you get stuck.
Exactly. Energy actually gets blocked by tensing up muscles and creating energy blockages. Besides, they grunt most likely because they're using force instead of power. So what we're doing is we're learning how to use power instead of force. And we project energy by relaxing rather than tensing up. The arm is like a whip. Yeah. So your whip basically doesn't require tension. If the whip tenses up, it becomes a stick. Well, you can use a stick, but whip would work even more in a wave-like fashion. So that's basically what we're learning to do with our own limbs, with our legs. With our arms and legs. Now, as I mentioned, the secondary movement, called closing, is performed in a way that looks like a miniature maneuver just by the center line here, screwing the light bulb. Well, we can turn this into a primary movement and make it a bigger circle, but we need to turn instead of sidestepping. So instead of sidestep, where the opening is the primary movement, we can turn and let this hand that was performing a miniature circle here actually make a bigger circle. Yeah, nice. It's a movement that we also practice, for example, when painting circles in a horizontal plane. So it's a wave-like motion that feels circular. If it doesn't feel circular, it's not closing, it's something else. Of course, an important element of closing is a natural turn, which is performed on the heel of the back foot. So I don't want to pivot on the ball of the back foot, which is what most people do when they make this kind of a swing or hook type of movement in boxing or in other martial arts. They lift the heel, and then they wonder why they don't have much power in that movement. Instead of lifting the heel, which of course would require contracting the calf muscle, instead we keep the heel on the ground so that the bone structure of the leg basically connects to the ground more directly. And all of a sudden, there is much more power. Even if the back leg is bent at the knee, that's okay. You still have solid bone structure connecting you to the ground. And of course, between the natural turns, there is this magic tap. Notice what happens to my elbows. They rise and fall simultaneously. Why do they rise and fall at the same time? Because the center of mass also comes up and down. When I tap the ground, it comes up, and then it comes down, and then eventually the foot lands in the ground after I deliver the closing energy projection. Beautiful. Yeah, so if you allow the elbow to come up and down, the whole movement of the arm becomes more fluid and wave-like. And what's interesting is that the Laogung point actually points towards you as you project energy, bringing whatever you are delivering strike into closer to you. It's like you're giving somebody a hug with one hand, with one arm. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, so it's a really assertive kind of hug. This hug also can be a pretty powerful impact. So in the context of martial arts, most people don't really know what to do with closing. Of course, you can use it as a defensive maneuver. Closing works great for self-defense. If somebody is striking or pushing or kicking, you can actually just do a closing and basically spin off that energy projection coming at you so that it misses your body. But it also can be a powerful energy projection or recycling of energy, as I like to call it. So I basically transform most of the terminology of martial arts into energy terminology. Instead of hitting somebody, I say, we're energy recycling. Now, sounds really cute, but it can be very powerful. This energy recycling brings the target closer to me, hence the name. And in order to work, the Lagun point needs to actually point at me at the moment of impact. Yeah, so at the moment of impact, I'm using the other hand, by the way, as a target. Yeah, it's basically like a half-baked, half-assed opening. So the closing strike actually brings energy closer to me, and I'm just holding the hand here to provide a target and to deliver impact into. And by the way, that's also what happens when you perform closing. The other hand does miniature opening. Miniature, or sometimes it can be half-baked opening. Basically, you don't want to open energy, project energy away from you when you're doing closing. So you kind of keep it relatively intact. Yeah, very nice. That's what we were doing with the stick. This hand was holding the stick, and we were just making this movement, sweeping in a circular manner with an imaginary broom. So if you imagine a broom attached to the end on the stick, then you would be making circular movements with that broom. The other hand is holding the opposite end of the broom. So that's the opening. A Lagun point pointing pretty much away from you. That's why I can deliver closing into it. And it makes a slap. Do you guys have any questions about openings or closings?
Is it important to be able to do it with the stick?
It's really nice. It's really nice because it gives the body an idea of what the two arms are doing at the same time. Basically, it kind of trains the body to perform secondary movement with the other arm, just so that you don't do something else that is less effective. Now, sometimes you don't, sometimes I teach my students without a stick, and it's okay too. For example, right now we're practicing without a stick. That's perfectly okay. On some occasions, I say, stick may not be even necessary. For example, doing uppercut, the stick may actually cause a little confusion because the stick is usually held in front of the body here. And if you don't pay attention, the hand is going to be going up somewhere in front of the body instead of to the side of the body. We want the hand to go to the side of the body, just like we were practicing uppercut, and the hand went behind the back of the head when we were using the elbow. Now we're going to actually use the open hand for the uppercut. But before we do the uppercuts, actually, let's take a look at downward press, if you don't mind.
I have a question to, for example, this one. For example, I noticed when I do it without the stick, I can really see the difference between my sides. Like one side, it's like one arm is just easy to coordinate. And the other one is just slower. It's just slower to coordinate the entire arm. And I think maybe this is cause of the holding. What can that be? Maybe holding out. What it's easier in one direction, and also one arm is faster than the other.
Yes.
And also even at the shoulder, I sense it, but also in the entire arm, for example. When I do it with the stick, it's easier to have equal, how to say, yes, equal distance. There's not so much difference, but when I do it without the stick, it's easier to sense which arm is best coordinated than control the other.
I understand. Well, I noticed, by the way, that when you are doing this movement with a stick, the angle of the stick that you're holding in your hand, let's say, instead of a stick, I'm going to grab my didgeridoo, but you're actually holding it at an angle like this. What I always talk about is that ideally the stick would be a continuation of your forearm. So when you're making this movement, the stick is just following your forearm more or less perfectly. It doesn't have to be perfect alignment. You know, it's going to be maybe a little bit of an angle, but not too much.
Okay.
Why do we not want to have too much of an angle?
The water grip and
Because you're going to lose the water grip. Now, instead of water grip, it's going to be something else. It's going to be the earth grip, or it's going to be some kind of in-between grip. And what we do is we learn how to use the water grip as much as we can. Yeah, when it's not a water grip, it's easy to lose grip on whatever you're holding. So there is an element of air grip. Element of air grip is something that I introduce in the context of our apprenticeship program. We have a study dedicated to the element of air, and that is the element that is missing in pretty much all other styles of Qigong, because most Qigong styles come from China. And in Chinese medicine and in Chinese philosophy, they talk about 5 elements. What are those elements?
Wood and metal.
Water, metal, earth. What else?
I said them all. I don't know which one you're missing.
Wood and fire. Earth, metal, wood, fire, and water. So the 5 elements in the Chinese medicine or Chinese system of elements are missing element of air. Now, the element of metal and the element of wood are still representative of hard matter, similar to earth. Interestingly enough, throughout the world, most indigenous cultures and traditional healing practices, often referred to as shamanism, basically use the same 4 elements: element of earth, water, air, and fire. You can find them in European shamanism, in Celtic shamanism, and Native American shamanism. That's the reason why they use the crosses. It's the way, like Celtic cross, for example, it's just the way to divide this circle into 4 corners. Why are they dividing into 4 corners? Because they actually have associated elements, just like Native American medicine's shield. It's basically the same thing, only without a cross. Although sometimes they actually put the line across the circle too. But the idea is the medicine shield represents the wheel of elements kind of transforming or transmuting into each other. Similar to Hawaiian shamanism, similar to Tibetan shamanism, Siberian shamanism, they all use the same 4 elements. And because there is the element of air in our system, because it comes from Tibetan and Siberian shamanism, there is actually kind of new practice, new for most Qigong practitioners who study Chinese shamanism, that doesn't have the element of air at all. And so a lot of things that you can see in the more advanced levels of our training are completely foreign to most people who practice Chinese Qigong. And that's okay. We just have unfair advantage because we basically have a different element to work with. And we still get to work with those hard matter elements such as metal and wood, because they're basically part of the whole element of Earth system of working with hard matter, such as represented in the body in the form of a skeleton.
Mm.
We also work with other aspects of the element of air, because it's more multidimensional than element of earth and element of water. We'll get into that a little bit later. Right now, we're working with element of water, which is actually two-dimensional as compared to one-dimensional element of earth. And we're also learning eventually how to work with 3 dimensions. Let's look at the dimension going straight down, or this movement downward press, maybe not directly projecting energy downwards, but a slight angle, like a spiral. A lot of movements in Qidao, as you can see, are somewhat spiraling. So here we're spiraling down, projecting energy towards the opposite knee. Why is the opposite knee? Because it's a yin movement. So we project energy towards the center line, and the opposite knee would need to be on the center line because we observe the principle of stabilization. Yin movements, such as downward press, closing, and forward push, require the step with the opposite foot. And that's exactly what's happening in downward press. So I go down with a downward press and project energy towards the opposite knee. Very good. Now, the tricky thing is that that opposite leg should not land too soon. In order to keep it from landing too soon, we need to lift it higher. So we actually can use the tap to make sure that the foot comes up high enough. So it takes time to land. Yeah, if your foot comes up high enough to land, it will not land too soon. If you land too soon, you will not be able to use gravity to your advantage. So you will resort to using force, just the strength of your muscles of the arms. Now we want to be strong, but we want to also use greater power than our personal power. So we use the power of Mother Earth, gravity. What does the other hand do, by the way? What is the secondary movement associated with downward press?
Uppercut.
Uppercut, exactly. Uppercut is the beginning of the next downward press. So when you're making one downward press, you're already preparing for the next one, just in case. Yes. Where else would downward press come from, other than up here? Well, up here is exactly where uppercut ends. So basically, you perform uppercut, downward press, and the other hand, uppercut, downward press, and the other hand, uppercut, downward press. So they are transforming or transmuting from one into the other, from yin movement to yang movement and back. Again, perfect example of how we don't just talk about yin and yang energies, we actually embody them in our physical actions in our body. Now, one other thing that also can be used, uppercut can be used for, believe it or not, is also a self-defense move. This move can work really well to protect your body, or your head in particular, from anybody trying to hit you or punch you in the face. You can literally just protect your head or your face with this movement, just brushing it off. So we don't block. When somebody is trying to project energy at us in the context of martial arts situation or self-defense situation, we don't block. We don't just try to stop the movement. We brush it off. Instead of stopping it, we actually let it go past this. When the movement goes past the intended distance, the person who's making the movement is likely to be surprised and actually will possibly lose balance just because his energy is going farther than he anticipated to go. I mean, I personally have sent quite a few people on the ground falling or flying by simply letting their moves go further than they anticipated to go. Now, obviously, we're not learning Qidao just to learn martial arts or to learn self-defense. It's an energy art. But it's good to know that there are some applications of it that can save our lives. I mean, literally, my practice of Qidao saved my life more than once in a variety of tough situations that I found myself in. Even if it doesn't save your life, maybe it will save life of some of your students in the future. So let's keep that in mind. Now, what we do with the downward press is we want to make sure that we don't press down this way. When people try to push something down, they often think that this is the way to push. In other words, they stick their elbow out. And in order to lift the elbow, they have to tense up the shoulder. When there is such tension in the shoulder muscle in the deltoid, it will create an energy blockage. We don't want any energy blockages, do we? We want to relax this shoulder muscles so that the energy can flow freely through the shoulder to the elbow and past the elbow into the hand. So just like the downward press with the elbow that we learned in our basic program, it's very similar, except now you send the wave past the elbow into the hand.
So again, like a whip.
Yes, again, like a whip. And one thing that you want to observe is which part of the hand delivers the impact into the target. Laogun point, yes. A lot of my students studied martial arts. And it's a popular move in karate, especially. They call it karate chop. Well, official name in Japanese is suta uke. Basically, striking with the edge of the palm. People think that this is going to give them a lot of power. Well, if you actually try to press with the edge of the palm, you will notice how weak it is compared to pressing with the Laogun point, with the palm downwards. How much more power you have with the Laogun point actually projecting energy in the direction of your intended energy projection. Now, some people think, well, maybe it's not the edge of the palm. Maybe I need to strike with the heel of the palm. And so there are some Kung Fu styles that actually use the strike with the palm of the, with the heel of the palm. That's how they mess up their wrist joints. I don't recommend doing that. So let's not do that. Obviously, other alternatives would be even worse, whether it would be the bottom of the knuckles, it just won't work. And the thumb side of the palm is completely impossible to use to press downwards. So that's not an issue. But what we learn is how to project energy downwards with the Laogun point, and it will give you the maximum power. So that's one of the reasons why karate chops are not what we do, either downwards or also opening. Opening sometimes reminds people of karate chops sideways like this. But again, it's not what we want to do because it's Sutta Uchi. And that's not what we're trying to do because again, the edge of the palm is not going to give us as much power as the surface of the entire palm, especially with the Laogun point pointing directly to target. So here, same thing. Same thing with uppercut. It's not the heel of the palm. It's not the edge of the palm. It's not the thumb side. It's not the bottom of the knuckles. It's the center of the palm that we project energy with. So the only difference between what we were just doing a minute ago and now is that instead of dropping the center of mass down, we actually lifting the center of mass up. The other hand is still doing downward press. It's actually similar to the move in Tai Chi called petting the horse's mane. Again, one hand is doing uppercut, the other one is doing downward press. Most Tai Chi styles don't really understand the idea of primary movement. So they don't drop the center of mass down, they don't lift it up, they're just gonna move at the same height. Well, that makes neither one of these primary movement. We either need to drop down to make downward press work, or come up, which is going to make the uppercut primary movement. And we make the movement with the foot exactly the same as in our basic program. When we step with the same side foot, since it's the yang movement, pivot on the ball of the foot as the hand goes up and out, and then drop the heel down to stomp into the ground by straightening the knee and thrusting the hip of that side of the body upwards. And from the movement of the hip upwards, the wave will translate into the shoulder, and from the shoulder will go into the arm, all the way into the hand.
How much does it actually rotate?
It rotates so that your thumb points more or less towards your head. So if your thumb is not pointing towards your head, it means you didn't rotate very much. Why are we rotating the hand at all? It's because in context of self-defense applications, uppercut, it focuses on one particular target, the chin. And if you don't turn your hand, then you will basically stick your fingers under the chin, and your palm will not fit under the chin. You need to actually turn so that the palm would be facing upwards, and the fingers would not be in the way.
It's a bit difficult to do with me.
Oh yeah. How do you straighten the arm, or is it still bent? I mean, it depends on the target, of course, but now that there isn't a target, then where does it end?
Yeah, even if there is no target to strike, we don't want to extend the limbs completely. At no point in time will you see me teaching or practicing straightening arms or straightening the legs all the way. Why do we not do it? Because it's not healthy. You can easily overextend your arm if you throw your arm fast and furious upwards or in any direction. So we just don't do it. How far do we go? Like you said, it depends on the height of the target. If you need to toss something really high, you will probably go higher. Yeah, but if you're just practicing to develop harmonious culture movement, you don't have to extend the arm above your head. So essentially, yeah, for you, Ane, maybe most of your targets would be higher because they're going to be probably taller people than you. So you have to practice going a little bit further up. But generally speaking, we don't need to lift the hand much higher than the height of our head. So we basically go as high as we go, and then notice how my elbow doesn't straighten. It's still bent. Yeah. Similarly, we don't straighten the elbow, for example, when we do forward push. See, it's like the elbow doesn't straighten. When I do opening, elbow doesn't straighten. It bends down and relaxes after the opening, so there is no undue tension. You can only achieve that straightening by tensing up the muscles, and we don't want that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions about either downward press or uppercut? No questions? Well, you guys are amazing. You learn so fast and get everything just right. So,
Maybe the customer comes
Yeah.
later.
okay. Well, you're welcome to send me questions by email. I also received your question by email, Karina, regarding the last couple of sessions that you suggested to save until I make my way to Denmark, so that we would be able to have face-to-face sessions, which would be perfectly fine by me. Perhaps what we will do then is we will save the sessions dedicated to working with different organs of the body, because they require initiation into the practice of empowerment. And I will be happy to conduct this initiation and do those sessions with you afterwards. How does that sound? Wonderful. Okay. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, let me just suggest, I didn't mention principles of body alignment, other than when we were talking about forward push and backward pull, but guess what? They're still the same principles. So we don't want to forget about orientation or forget about stabilization. Under some conditions, they're going to be different. For example, when you're projecting energy outwards, the hand is not going to be on your center line. Yeah, that's the definition of the yang movement. Yin movement brings the hand to the center line. Yang movement takes the hand away from the center line. For example, in the context of opening, you also are not going to observe the principle of stabilization, because neither one of the legs is going to be the weight-bearing leg. You basically will try to do so that 50-50 distribution of weight will be happening between the right and left feet. So when you're doing an opening, you don't want to lean towards the target. If you lean towards the target, it simply means that you're too far away from your target. So you need to step closer. And when you step close enough, you will be actually relatively symmetrical, which means also distributing equal weight on the right and left foot. Why do we want to distribute weight equally in this particular case? Because it will give you the ability to maintain stability and balance, even though you're projecting energy off center line. So that's kind of an interesting give and take. You know, sometimes you need to project energy away from your center line. You need to compensate for that somehow. Well, this is one of the ways to compensate for it, to become really stable. Now, for example, in uppercut, you are uprooting yourself. You're actually lifting the heel up temporarily. But then you're going to reroot by stumping into the ground with that heel so that you reconnect to the ground. This is something that we'll be also exploring in more advanced levels of our practice, is that sometimes you can uproot yourself and reroot yourself. And that will actually give you an additional energy wave, just like in the uppercut. That's where the energy wave comes from the rerouting of the heel, which is really powerful. A lot of people wonder, how can you do this seemingly difficult movement upwards? You're not relying on the gravity. Where does the power come from? Well, the power comes from rerouting the heel. That's where else would it come from? It doesn't come from my muscle strength. Even though my muscles are relatively strong, I don't want to rely on strength, because that would be using force. Strong muscles are relaxed muscles. So when I can project energy upwards without tensing up these muscles too much, that would be the ideal way to do it. If I tense up the muscles too much, I will be feeling sore after doing uppercuts. I don't want to feel sore after doing uppercuts. I hope you don't feel sore. If you do, that's an invitation to do some strength training for those muscles of the shoulders. When they become strong enough, they will not feel overworked when you actually do a few uppercuts here or there. Makes sense, right? Very cool. Well, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to let you go. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. And also, I have not solidified where we're going to have our intermediate Qidao workshop, because we haven't arranged anything at the Raven Hall or any place where we might be able to do it. If you have any news about that, let me know now or whenever you have the news.
Yes, it was because we were talking about, would it be in the middle of the week or in the weekend? So
It's probably going to be on the weekend if it works.
Yeah.
So most likely it's going to be Saturday and Sunday. If the hall is available, great. We would like to be able to use it.
And how long time do we need? How many? 2 days, 1 day, hours? What is needed?
Saturday and Sunday, we usually practice in the morning for a few hours, 2 or 3 hours in the morning, take a lunch break, come back to do some meditation, do some more movement practice, about 3 hours, like from 2 to 5 o'clock, then break for the day, and then come back the following day. And again, do 3 hours in the morning, take a lunch break, 3 more hours in the afternoon. Usually we start at 10 o'clock in the morning, go till 1, take 1 hour break for lunch, and then go from 2 to 5. If necessary, we sometimes go a little bit past 5 o'clock. That is not a problem for me. If it is not a problem for you, we'll be flexible.
Okay, so the starting hour would be the best of
I usually start at 10 o'clock in the morning if that's available. Sometimes the space that I use for my workshops is not available at 10, so we start whenever it is available. So if you have access to this a calendar of the space,
yeah, I have.
would you check and let me know?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I will let you go. Have a great week. And I'll look forward to seeing you
Thank
next time.
you. You too.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.